Good evening, everyone, and we are live, so welcome to this Instagram live session. And we are here live on Instagram. At the same time, I do a recording for YouTube so that we can upload it later on. And I'm glad that you are joining me today. If you join the chat, then please write where you're from, and maybe you also write on what level are you at the moment in terms of consulting careers. So are you a student? Are you already a consultant? So just write it in the chat. And today there will be an open Q&A session. So I collected some questions up front, so I will go through that questions first. But I want to do this a bit more interactive today. So if you have any questions, then just write them down in the chat and I will go through those questions. And maybe before we start with the questions, maybe a short heads up. So as you probably know or realized, I wasn't very active in the past month here on Instagram or on YouTube. And the reason was that I was very, very busy with preparing my first online course. And for those of you who never worked on an online course, believe me, it's a lot of work, much more work than I initially thought. So this took quite some time. And to be honest, I really needed to focus for the online course. But now the first course is done, and that's why I now also have more focus for being more active on social media again. And I've been publishing daily videos on YouTube so far in the past week, and I hope to be able to keep up with the pace, and then we will see. Good, so I would say let's start with the questions. As always, if you have any questions, then please write them in the chat and I will answer them. I received a couple of questions up front and I want to go through those questions. So the first question that I received was from Charlotte, and the question was, why did I become a management consultant? And I tell the story very often. So initially, after doing my Abitur here in Germany, so that's equivalent to high school in the US, I actually wanted to become a musician. So I studied music. I actually was a professional musician directly after doing my Abitur here in Germany. And I also studied music. The thing was that at that time, it was in the 2010s, and it was like the worst time ever to join the music industry, because we had a lot of disruption going on. And this was basically, the time when Napster did all of this music piracy stuff. Then we had Spotify, iTunes. They completely disrupted the music industry. So it was very tough as a musician to survive in this kind of environment. And this led to some financial problems because, I wasn't able to get the jobs that I needed, to be honest. And so I built some financial debt. And at that time, I was kind of very desperate because I was very unhappy with my situation. And I was looking for a pivot, so for a career pivot. And at that time, I did an internship at a music label at a large media company here in Germany. And there I met an ex-McKinsey partner. And this McKinsey partner told me about his life as a management consultant. And you can imagine, a 20-year-old person, who is in financial debt and, who's looking for a career pivot. And, meeting this McKinsey guy, he talked about how fancy the consulting lifestyle is. He talked about, that he had those exciting travel lifestyle, that he worked with, top strategic decision makers all of the time, that he was financially independent. And at that time, for me personally, this was very appealing. And that was the moment when I decided, okay, being a management consultant seems to be pretty cool. So I decided, okay, I want to do that. Unfortunately, at that time, I realized that I didn't fulfill all the prerequisites, okay? Because what I did was I bought a book that explained how I could get into management consulting. The issue was that, I read like the prerequisites, like, okay, having a business degree, going to a top university, you know, being in the top 5% of your class, stuff like that. And then I looked at my CV and I saw, okay, you know, I'm studying music, not business. I didn't go to a fancy university back then. And also my grades were pretty average. Okay, so I, you know, didn't fulfill the prerequisites at all. But I took the challenge and I really worked very hard. I also did a second degree in business. Then I also joined, you know, many student consulting clubs, really worked on my consulting skills. And after like 4 or 5 years of very hard work, I have to say, I finally joined consulting. And now I'm in consulting for 4 years. I'm a project manager at the moment and I'm very, very happy. Fidei says, as a 4th semester engineering student that has a big dream on working in management consulting, what step that I should take to prepare consulting interviews and other relatable things? Thank you. That is a very good question. So if you're in the 4th semester, I assume that you are talking about your bachelor's degree. Well, and this is also what I talk about in the consulting crash course that I just launched. If you're interested in that, then check out the link in my bio. So what I recommend, and this is also the structure of the course. So first of all, you should learn about the consulting industry. Okay, so try to get familiar with what consulting is all about. You can check out all the free content that you find online, like my channel or also Firm Learning from Heinrich, for example. There are, you know, many other channels as well. Also, there are many great books about consulting that you can read. And the main goal should here be, you know, that you just get familiar with the consulting industry, that you know how it works, what the prerequisites are, and so on. So this is step number 1. Step number 2 is that you define the right firm for you. So I think, you know, you have to be very, very clear about what kind of firm you want to join, because consulting is not consulting. It's completely different if you want to join McKinsey, BCG or Bain, like the strategy sector, or if you want to join, you know, the big 4 like KPMG, Ernst & Young and so on, or if you want to go in the tech sector like Accenture and Capgemini, or even if you want to go to a more specialized firm. If you say you have an engineering background, you know, you could also consider going to a smaller, like more specialized firm. So the second step would be that you really try to figure out, okay, what kind of company do I want to join? And then the third step is that you should do a kind of self-assessment. So take a look at the prerequisites, like your academic background, your practical experiences, also your ability of, solving case studies, so interview preparation and so on, and make an honest assessment. So think about, where are my strengths, okay, and where are my weaknesses? And then, I mean, you're still in the 4th semester, so this means you still have a couple of months time, like, you know, probably you do 6 semesters, so this means you still get more than a year time to compensate for weaknesses. So for example, if you say your grades are your weaknesses, come on, you still get a year, okay? If you say you don't have a lot of practical experience, you still have a lot of time left, okay? So this might also be an option. And then, you know, as a 4th step, and if you really try to compensate those weaknesses, and because you specifically ask about interview prep, then I would really try to, get the resources. I mean, if we talk about interviews, then I think there are several steps. Like step number 1 is that you buy all of those basic interview prep books, like Case in Point, for example. So there are many books that, you know, give you a basic understanding of how those case studies work. This is level number 1. Level number 2 is that you go to a platform provider like Prep Lounge, for example. Those are usually, you know, online platforms, or Victor Cheng, for example, also offers online platforms or online courses that give you a more detailed introduction to interview preparation. This is level number 2. And level number 3 would be if you take a coaching, like my friends of In and Out Consulting here in Germany. They offer, for example, personal coachings, and this would be the 3rd level. Okay, so in terms of interview preparation, I always would first read the books. Second, I would go to the platforms like Prep Lounge or Victor Cheng, for example. And if you want to invest more money, you can do personal one-on-one coachings to prepare for the interviews. Okay, but again, so those are, you know, this is just a quick take on your question. So all of the questions will be answered in more detail in the online course. Then Soul10 asks, what's the difference between being a management consultant and a strategic consultant, when it comes to working? Well, I mean, the terms are, I mean, there is no fixed definition for, you know, being a strategy consultant or being a management consultant. Typically, if you say you are a strategy consultant, then I would think that you would work probably for an MBB firm, so McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. And also tier 2 firms, so smaller strategy firms. This is what I would define being a strategy consultant. A management consultant could also be someone you know, working at the Big Four, for example. So BCG, KPMG, Deloitte, PwC, Ernst & Young, etc. And the main difference in terms of working hours, for example, is that because you said in terms of working. So in strategy consulting, you typically work, I would say, between 60 and 70 hours on average, while this is a bit less in management consulting. Okay, so in you know, the more operational consulting. So there you typically have between 50 and 60 hours. Those are only average numbers. Okay, so there are certainly exceptions. Okay. Also, in terms of salary, obviously the salary is higher in strategy consulting, and it's a bit lower in, you know, the more operational consulting. And if we talk about the topics, obviously you usually, so your main client, if you work in strategy consulting, is usually the top management. And there you work on more, I would say, strategic topics, which typically is, you know, increasing revenues, decreasing costs, or doing organizational changes. While if you work for the Big Four, for example, you also have more like operational projects that really go into depth in terms of process analysis, you know, organizational optimization, or even some implementation topics. Okay, so those are the three main differences, I would say. So I hope this answers your question. Praver says, I want to start something on my own in 10 years. Where should I begin? In startup or consultancy or product management? That is a very good question. I think there is no right or wrong. So it highly depends what you want to start. Okay, so very, very difficult question. I think, you know, let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of each of those paths. So if you say consulting, I think there you get a very good overview of all the business methods, concepts, hard skills, soft skills like communication, you know, analytical thinking. So this is probably what you get in consulting. Okay, so I consider this, you know, like 2 years more of studying. Okay, because you learn so much about all of those soft skills, hard skills that are not only important for management consulting, but which are really the basis of all the jobs that you can do out there. So that's probably consulting. If we talk about startup, I really think that you can learn there, you know, if you work together with a, I would say with a very hungry entrepreneur, you can learn a lot from this person on a personal level. But then I would really try, you know, to be there at the beginning, because, you know, what you want to learn is not like, you know, the actual job that you do. I would say if you start in a startup and want to be a founder one day yourself, I think the most important thing that you can do is to learn from the founder. Okay, so how does this person think? How does this person, you know, tackle problems? What kind of challenges does this person face? How does the person deal with it? Okay, so I wouldn't join just any kind of startup. I really would try to figure out, okay, from which person can I learn the most? And that's probably what you get out of startup if you join a startup. And in terms of product management, to be honest, I don't have much experience with product management. If you are more the product guy, so if you have more like a technical background, this really might be, you know, a good step, you know, to get a good feeling about how to build a product. But I think, you know, if you talk about startup, there are always two positions. The first one is, or two roles. The first role or the important role is, you know, building the product. And the second important role is doing the sales. And I think if you want to start a startup, it's always, you know, you always have to think about, okay, what kind of role do I want to have? Am I more the product guy or am I more the sales guy? And if you say you're more the product guy, then, you know, product development might be or might make sense. But if you say you're more the sales guy, then I wouldn't, go into product management, because I think, you know, then the learnings are not, that valuable. Can you switch as IT consultant to management consulting without starting as a junior. Yes, this is possible, but it depends on what level you are. But be aware that if you join a different consulting firm, so very, very often you are downgraded, okay? Because they don't know what kind of, if you fit to the culture, for example. And what they typically do is that they hire you, but on one level below your current level, but that you have a shorter trial period, okay? So that's what they typically do. And if you have like 2 years of experience, I think they wouldn't, hire you as a junior. But if you only have like 1 year of experience, then, maybe they would grade you as a junior. But if you have 6 years of experience, obviously, they would probably, grade you as a consultant or junior project manager or something like that. So be aware that whenever you do a change or a shift to another consultancy, that, you are downgraded for a short time period. And the consultancies usually do that because they want to test if you fit to the culture, for example. Can you tell about management or operational kind of roles which are available in IT company? Well, I'm not sure if I get your question, but if the question is what kind of roles there are in a IT firm, then, there are thousands of roles or hundreds at least of roles. Typically you have like the really, there are 3 types of roles that you typically have. You either are in the very hard tech role. So this means that you really do technical implementation. You can also, this would be the other side, be in a business role. Okay. And this would be like, only working on the business side. And then there's also something in between where you say, okay, you are more in the project management of IT projects, for example. And those are probably the 3 roles that I see in software related companies. I'm not sure if that's your question, but if not, then please write in the chat again. Can you tell us about your career path in consulting since you worked in it for 4 years? Yes, I can do so. So you typically, or I started as a consultant on the consulting level. In our company, it's called associate. And this is a typical consulting role. Then I was 2 years a consultant. And what you usually do there is that you really work on deliverables. So this means like you are responsible for the PowerPoint, the Excel files, doing the business case, doing research, stuff like that. Then I was 1 year senior associate or senior consultant, and there you get more responsibility. In most cases, you are responsible for a stream. A stream is within a larger project, is a kind of sub-project, okay, or a topic that you are responsible for. That was my time as a senior consultant. And then last year I got promoted to project manager. And, I'm a project manager now for roughly a year. And now I am responsible for a medium-sized project, I would say. So my past project was, I was leading 3 to 5 people. And now it's only 2 to 3 people. So it highly depends, even as a project manager, you don't have always large projects. Of course, there are also smaller projects that you're responsible for. And yeah, so that's my career path. And I think the biggest learning for me was that you need entirely different skills on each level. So while you on the consulting level, so consultant and senior consultant, they really need to be very, very strong in PowerPoint, Excel, problem solving, research, so the basics, communication, organization. But once you get project manager, those skills become less and less important, and you really need to learn how to organize, how to communicate with key stakeholders, how to manage a team, how to manage a partner. It's really, really different. Okay, so that's probably my main learning. Was sagst du zu Pumpkin? What's your opinion on Pumpkin careers? From David Weller. I think they're doing a good job. To be honest, I haven't, I have no personal experience. I only know them from social media. And I think they're pretty successful. So if anyone here in the chat has some personal experiences with Pumpkin careers, then let us know. So I don't have personal experiences, and unless I have no negative experience, I assume that they are doing a great job. Business roles, can you please elaborate? Well, if you join after an MBA, so I mean, there are several, the most typical roles is probably that you become a project manager, so that within a company, you really take are responsible for certain strategic projects. So this is probably the one side. The other side is that you are, in the division, so that you take a middle management role in a IT division or in some kind of department within the company. And probably the third option would be that you are in some kind of a venture business, right? So that you say, okay, you're really responsible for business development, to kind of creating a new business for the company. So those are the three things that I would see if you, and that's what I assume, that you as you probably have an IT background, then you did an MBA, and now you want to join a IT company. And that are typically the three roles that I would see, like project manager, role number one. Role number two is being in the line, so in a division in the middle management. And number three is being in the business development, so really working on new business for the company. So that's what I would see, but it highly depends, of course, on the company. What does fitting in a culture means? Like which clients or with your team? Yeah, with your team probably. So each company has their own culture and also kind of, different style of working. So there are some companies, for example, that are more hierarchical. There are some companies who are less hierarchical, I would say. And, this might be, for example, or, in some companies you have a stronger upper out policy. In some companies you have a less strong upper out policy. And if you are successful in one company, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can also be successful in the other company. So that's why they kind of grade you a bit lower usually, and have a trial period. Is consulting only a office job? No, not at all. Usually you travel a lot, so that's what makes consulting so exciting, at least pre-COVID. And post-COVID, I mean, we start traveling again. So typically if you work in consulting, you are, back in the old days, you were at the client side from Monday to Thursday. And this can be, in a different city, different country, different continent, highly depends on the project. And Friday is typically office day. But, this kind of changed because due to COVID, obviously, many people do a lot of home office and many companies. And, I don't know exactly how this will develop in the future. What I see now is that we have a mixture that, we roughly do half of the time, we are at the client side, roughly half of the time we are in home office. So how can a guy with operations management can take ahead as a career? What are possibilities? Please, can you highlight? Well, I don't have any personal experience with operations management, to be honest. I'm more in the strategic sector, so that's not what I'm specialized in. But my best guess is, and it's always the same. The best investment that you can do is the investment in yourself. And, interestingly, those of you who follow Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, they had the Berkshire shareholder meeting, I think yesterday or the day before yesterday. And there again, they highlighted, how important it is to invest in yourself and to invest in the skills. So Warren Buffett always tells the story that the best investment that he did was in a communication class from Dale Carnegie back then. And I think this is always also true. It doesn't matter what kind of career path we talk about. So to get ahead, the best way to do that is to invest in yourself. And this means you should start reading a lot. So I would say at least one book a week. So this should be your stretch goal. You should do online courses. You should, consume free stuff. So instead of watching Netflix in the evening, you should really listen to podcasts, for example, and try to read interesting stuff. And really, it highly depends on what your niche is or where you want to specialize. But I really, really would consider investing a lot in myself, okay? Especially at the beginning. So before, I don't know your net worth, but before you invest in, stocks or crypto or something else, invest in yourself and really try to educate yourself. That's, I think, the best and most general advice that I can give you. Can a management consultant be a board member or a CEO with time? So what do you mean, like with time? At the same time or at some time? So yes, of course, that's possible. Especially if you're a partner. So many partners in my firm are like interim CEOs or run their own companies as a side business. So that's totally possible, yes. Any podcast suggestions? Depends on what you are interested in. So I really like Tim Ferriss. This is, I think, a great podcast. I also like We Study Billionaires. That's also very good. And then I actually read a lot, and I also watch some YouTube videos, to be honest. But really try it, you have to identify what kind of topics you're interested in, and then you should try to identify good podcasts and, just do some research. What a very nice last question. Do partners work less hours? No, they don't. They typically work more, I would say. But the thing is that partners are much more flexible, and it's the same, as a project manager. Many of my consulting fellows at my company say, wow, no, you're project manager, you have to work less. So it's not true, you work more, but of course you are a bit more flexible, okay, because you are responsible and you can kind of, schedule or, adjust the schedule a bit more according to your personal needs. And that's not the case if you're a junior, but I think in terms of working hours, it's pretty much the same or even more, because many partners also work on the weekend, because at the end you're the one responsible, right? And your stakes are much higher, because typically, as well as a project manager, also as a partner, your compensation is highly based on the success of a project, and that is different as a consultant. And then last question, what do you think of blockchain? Well, it's a essential technology for many different sectors, and will have a huge impact, and it will disrupt many companies and functions. And yeah, I think it's like the internet, it has a impact on many different areas. So it's definitely worth to read a little bit and try to understand how a blockchain works and what it actually does. Good. Then thank you everyone for your time. As always, it was a pleasure. We will do the next Q&A probably at the end of the week or beginning next week, but I will let you know through the stories. And with that being said, thank you so much for your time and for the great questions. Doing those live questions is always my favorite part of the week, because I love the interaction. But with that being said, have a great evening. It's Monday. And talk to you very soon. Goodbye.